You know why people lose interest in you. It's not because you're not attractive enough. It's not because you're boring. It's not because they found someone better. It's because you're doing one thing that kills attraction faster than anything else. And the worst part? You think this behavior shows you care, but it doesn't. It shows you're desperate. And desperation is the ultimate attraction killer. Here's what's happening. Every time you try to secure someone's interest, you destroy it. Every time you try to make them like you more, you give them reasons to like you less. Every time you work harder to keep their attention, you make yourself less worthy of that attention. There's a specific pattern to how people lose interest. It's predictable. It follows the same psychological sequence every single time. First, they're curious about you. You're new, different, unpredictable. Their brain is engaged because it can't figure you out completely. Then, you start revealing too much too fast. You become too available, too eager, too transparent. You eliminate the mystery that made you interesting in the first place. Finally, their brain categorizes you as solved. No more mystery means no more fascination. No more fascination means no more interest. And here's the brutal truth. Once someone loses interest in you, trying harder to get it back only makes it worse. Every text you send trying to reconnect pushes them further away. Every effort to prove your worth confirms their decision to lose interest. Every attempt to win them back validates their choice to move on. But what if there was a way to reverse this process? What if you could not only get their interest back, but make yourself irresistible in a way that feels effortless? What if the solution required you to do less, not more? There are 4 specific steps that can make you irresistible again. 4 steps that will completely reverse this process and transform you from someone who's easy to ignore into someone who's impossible to forget. But here's the catch. Each step will feel wrong when you first try it. Each step goes against every instinct you have about how relationships work. And there's one step in particular that feels so counterintuitive, so against everything you've been taught about connection, that most people refuse to do it. But it's the most powerful one, the one that changes everything. Because here's what nobody wants to admit. The people who are irresistible aren't the ones trying to be irresistible. They're the ones who stopped caring whether they are or not. The pattern starts with something that feels good. Someone shows interest in you and your brain lights up. Finally, validation. Finally, someone who sees your worth. So what do? You give them more of what they seem to like. More attention, more availability, more of yourself. And at first it works. They respond positively. They seem engaged. You think you're building connection. But what you're actually doing is training their brain to take you for granted. Here's what happens in their mind. When something is always available, the brain stops prioritizing it. It's basic neuroscience. The same way you stop noticing background noise, you stop noticing people who become too predictable. You become emotional wallpaper, present but not significant. The irony is devastating. The more you try to secure their interest, the more you guarantee they'll lose it. You think consistency builds trust, but consistency without mystery builds boredom. You think availability shows you care, but constant availability shows you have nothing else going on. You think transparency creates intimacy, but too much transparency eliminates intrigue. And here's where most people make the fatal mistake. They interpret decreased interest as a sign they need to try harder. They double down on all the behaviors that caused the loss of interest in the first place. They become more available, not less. More transparent, not more mysterious. More eager, not more selective. It's like trying to fix a leak by adding more water. The brain is designed to value scarcity and ignore abundance. This isn't cruel or shallow. It's survival. In a world of infinite options, attention goes to what feels limited, special, uncertain. When you make yourself abundant in someone's life, you make yourself ignorable. This principle applies everywhere. Think about your favorite restaurant. If it was open 24/7 and never busy, would it feel as special or would it feel ordinary? The exclusivity is part of what makes experiences valuable. The same psychology governs human attraction. When someone can have your attention whenever they want it, your attention loses its appeal. When they know exactly how you'll respond to any situation, you become predictable. And predictable people don't generate excitement. But here's what's fascinating. The moment you start becoming scarce again, the moment you begin creating uncertainty around your availability, their brain wakes up. Suddenly, you're not emotional wallpaper anymore. You're a puzzle that needs solving again. The question isn't whether this psychological principle works. The question is whether you're brave enough to apply it, because the first step requires you to do something that will feel like giving up. The root cause of lost interest has a name: emotional overflow. You give too much of yourself before it's earned. You offer your full emotional capacity before someone has shown they value it. You become completely known before someone has invested enough to appreciate that knowledge. Think about anything you've ever lost interest in: a song you played too much, a food you ate too often, a place you visited repeatedly until it became routine. The same principle applies to people. Familiarity doesn't breed contempt, it breeds indifference. But here's what makes this particularly painful. You think emotional overflow is love. You think giving everything is generosity. You think being completely open is authenticity. And you're not wrong. It is all those things, but it's also the fastest way to become emotionally irrelevant to someone. When you reveal everything about yourself too quickly, you eliminate the discovery process that creates bonding. When you're always emotionally available, you remove the anticipation that makes your presence feel special. You become a solved equation in their mind, and solved equations don't generate curiosity. Here's the uncomfortable truth. People don't value what they haven't had to work for. Not because they're shallow, but because effort creates psychological investment. When someone has to wonder about your thoughts, they become more invested in discovering them. When someone has to earn your emotional availability, they value it more when they receive it. But when you hand over your complete emotional self immediately, there's nothing left to discover, no investment required, no mystery to unravel. You've given them the ending before they've become invested in the story. And this creates a psychological phenomenon called the solved puzzle effect. Once the brain categorizes something as completely understood, it stops paying attention to it. You don't become less valuable as a person, you become less interesting as an experience. This is why people can lose interest in someone they objectively know is amazing. It's not about your worth as a human being, it's about psychological engagement. When there's nothing left to figure out, the mind moves on to more complex puzzles. Think about the most captivating people in your life. Are they the ones who revealed everything about themselves immediately? Or are they the ones who maintained some level of intrigue, who you're still discovering new things about even after knowing them for years? The solution isn't to become cold or unavailable. The solution isn't to play games or manipulate emotions. The solution is to understand that being irresistible requires maintaining some level of mystery, even in close relationships. But most people are terrified of mystery. They think it means being fake or withholding love. It doesn't. It means understanding that total transparency kills the curiosity that keeps relationships alive. And if you want to become irresistible again, you need to become comfortable with being partially unknown. Step 1 is the hardest because it goes against every instinct about connection. Stop being an open book. Not because there's anything wrong with openness, but because books that reveal everything on the first page don't get finished. Mystery isn't about being secretive or deceptive. It's about understanding that discovery is part of what keeps people engaged with you. When someone knows everything about your thoughts, feelings, daily routine, and emotional reactions, what's left to discover? Here's what reclaiming your mystery actually looks like. You stop sharing every thought as it occurs to you. You stop explaining every emotion as you feel it. You stop giving a complete download of your inner world to anyone who shows interest. Instead, you become selective about what you reveal and when. This doesn't mean being dishonest. It means being strategic about the pacing of intimacy. Share your thoughts, but not all of them at once. Express your feelings, but let some remain unspoken. Talk about your experiences, but keep some stories for later. Think of it as emotional rationing. Not because your emotions aren't valuable, but because they're too valuable to spend carelessly. When you dole out pieces of yourself gradually, people have to stay engaged to get the full picture. They become invested in the discovery process. But when you dump everything at once, there's no reason to stick around for more. Here's a practical example. Instead of immediately sharing how much you like someone, let your actions suggest interest while keeping your feelings somewhat ambiguous. Let them wonder about the depth of your attraction. Instead of explaining every decision you make, let some of your choices remain mysterious. Let them wonder about your motivations. Instead of being completely predictable in your responses, sometimes respond in ways they don't expect. The goal isn't to confuse them. The goal is to maintain enough uncertainty that their mind stays engaged with figuring you out. But here's where most people sabotage themselves. They reclaim mystery for a week, then panic and flood the person with information again. Mystery has to be consistent. It has to become part of how you operate, not a temporary strategy. And here's the crucial part. Mystery only works if you're genuinely living a life worth being mysterious about. You can't just withhold information about a boring existence and expect people to be fascinated. You need to actually be doing interesting things, having interesting thoughts, and growing in interesting ways. The mystery has to be backed by substance. Mystery also requires confidence. You have to be comfortable with the fact that not everyone will understand you completely. You have to be okay with some level of misunderstanding or uncertainty about how others perceive you. This is terrifying for most people because we're taught that communication means explaining everything. But over-explanation kills intrigue. Sometimes the most powerful communication is what you choose not to say, because the next step is about creating that substance. Predictability is the death of attraction. If someone can anticipate your every move, predict your every response, and expect your every reaction, you've become boring. Step 2 is about strategic unpredictability, not chaos, not inconsistency for its own sake, but breaking the patterns that have made you easy to categorize and dismiss. Think about the patterns you've created. Do you always respond immediately? Do you always agree with their opinions? Do you always make yourself available when they want attention? Do you always have the same emotional temperature? Do you always show up the same way? Do you always want the same things? These patterns make you easy to take for granted because people know exactly what they're getting from you at any given moment. But what if you started surprising them? What if sometimes you took time to respond instead of answering immediately? What if sometimes you had your own opinion instead of agreeing with theirs? What if sometimes you were busy with your own life instead of being constantly available? This isn't about being difficult. It's about being dynamic. Real people have varying moods, changing priorities, evolving interests. Real people aren't the same every day. But somewhere along the way, you decided to be consistently one thing, consistently available, consistently agreeable, consistently predictable, and predictable people fade into the background of someone's consciousness. Here's what strategic unpredictability looks like. If you always text "good morning," sometimes don't. If you never express disagreement, sometimes share a different perspective. If you're always free on weekends, sometimes have your own plans. If you always respond with enthusiasm, sometimes be more measured. If you never challenge them, sometimes ask tough questions. The goal isn't to be difficult or contrary. The goal is to show the full range of who you are instead of just the agreeable parts. People are attracted to complexity, not simplicity, to depth, not surface, to humans, not personas. But here's the key. The unpredictability has to feel authentic. If it seems like you're just randomly changing your behavior to get a reaction, it backfires completely. The changes need to come from genuine evolution in your life, your interests, your perspectives. They need to reflect real growth and real experiences. Because what you're really doing isn't trying to confuse them. You're allowing them to see that you're a complete person with layers they haven't discovered yet. And people are naturally drawn to what they haven't fully understood. Breaking patterns also means being willing to disappoint sometimes, not maliciously but authentically. If you never say no, if you never have conflicting priorities, if you never have moments where you're not perfectly accommodating, you're not being human, you're being a service provider. And people don't fall in love with service providers. They fall in love with complex, sometimes difficult, always evolving human beings. But unpredictability alone isn't enough. You also need to be growing. Static people become invisible. People who stay the same, think the same thoughts, want the same things, and have the same perspectives. They fade into the routine of someone's life. Step 3 is about continuous evolution, not changing who you are fundamentally, but growing into new versions of yourself that keep people curious about who you're becoming. Think about the most fascinating people you know. Are they the ones who are exactly the same as they were 5 years ago, or are they the ones who are constantly learning, growing, experiencing new things? Evolution creates interest because it means there's always something new to discover about someone. When you stop growing, you stop being interesting, not because you become a bad person, but because you become a known quantity. But when you're constantly evolving, people have to stay engaged to keep up with who you're becoming. Here's what constant evolution looks like. You develop new interests regularly. You challenge your own beliefs and perspectives. You seek out experiences that change how you see the world. You don't just consume the same media, eat at the same restaurants, talk about the same topics, and think the same thoughts year after year. You become curious about things you've never explored. You learn skills you've never had. You develop opinions about subjects you've never considered. This isn't about becoming a different person. It's about becoming a fuller version of who you already are. When someone knows that you're always growing, they can never fully categorize you. There's always more to discover because you're always discovering more about yourself. But here's where most people get this wrong. They try to evolve just to impress someone else. They take up hobbies they don't care about or adopt interests that aren't authentic to them. That doesn't work because it's not sustainable and it's not genuine. Real evolution comes from genuine curiosity about life, from wanting to experience more, learn more, become more than you currently are. And when that evolution is authentic, it creates a magnetic effect. People want to be around someone who's growing because growth is energizing. Stagnation is draining. Evolution is inspiring. Evolution also means being willing to outgrow versions of yourself that no longer serve you. It means letting go of old identities, old limitations, old ways of being that have become comfortable but stagnant. This requires courage because growth always involves uncertainty. You have to be willing to not know who you're becoming in order to become someone new. Most people avoid this uncertainty. They stay in familiar patterns, even when those patterns no longer challenge or fulfill them. But familiar patterns create familiar people, and familiar people don't generate excitement. But evolution without boundaries becomes chaos, and that's where the final step comes in. The final step is the most counterintuitive. Make your attention scarce, not by playing games or being manipulative, but by genuinely valuing your own time and energy enough that you don't give it away freely to anyone who asks. Scarcity creates value. When something is always available, it becomes taken for granted. When something is limited, it becomes precious. Your attention, your time, your emotional energy, these are valuable resources. And if you treat them as unlimited and always available, other people will treat them the same way. But if you treat them as limited and valuable, others will start to value them too. This doesn't mean being cold or unavailable. It means being selective about when and how you give your attention. It means having your own life, your own priorities, your own schedule that doesn't revolve around being available to others whenever they want you. When someone knows they can access your attention anytime they want it, your attention loses value. But when they know your attention is limited and they have to earn it, it becomes something worth pursuing. Here's what creating healthy scarcity looks like. You don't always be the first one to reach out. You don't always be the one keeping conversations going. You don't always make yourself available when someone wants to hang out, not because you don't care, but because you have your own life that matters to you. You respond when you have time to give a thoughtful response, not immediately just to prove you're available. You make plans based on your schedule, not just on what works for other people. You invest your emotional energy in people who appreciate it, not just anyone who asks for it. This creates what psychologists call intermittent reinforcement. Sometimes your attention is available, sometimes it isn't, and this uncertainty keeps people's brains engaged. But here's the crucial part. The scarcity has to be real. You can't just pretend to be busy while sitting around thinking about them. You have to actually be living a life that's full enough that your attention genuinely is limited. And when your attention becomes genuinely scarce because you're genuinely engaged with your own life, something interesting happens. People start valuing the time they do get with you. They start appreciating your responses because they know they're not automatic. Your presence starts to feel like a gift instead of a given. Scarcity also means boundaries. It means saying no sometimes, not because you want to be difficult, but because you have other priorities. It means protecting your time and energy for the things and people that truly matter to you. Most people are afraid to create scarcity because they think it will push people away, but the opposite is true. Scarcity attracts the right people and repels the wrong ones. People who only want you when you're constantly available don't actually value you, they value convenience. But people who appreciate your limited attention, those are the ones worth keeping around. Here's what nobody tells you about becoming irresistible. It's not about making people want you, it's about becoming someone worth wanting. All 4 steps work because they force you to develop a genuine life that's interesting, mysterious, evolving, and valuable. You can't fake mystery without having depth. You can't fake unpredictability without actually growing. You can't fake evolution without really changing. You can't fake scarcity without genuinely having a life worth protecting. The process changes you into someone who naturally maintains interest because you've become genuinely interesting. But here's the deeper truth. Not everyone will appreciate this version of you. Some people prefer predictable, always available, emotionally transparent partners because it feels safer. And that's okay. Because the goal isn't to be irresistible to everyone. The goal is to be irresistible to the right people. People who value growth, mystery, complexity, and authenticity. People who want a partner, not a pet. People who are attracted to strength, not neediness. When you implement these 4 steps, you naturally filter for people who are capable of appreciating who you really are. You stop attracting people who want someone they can control or take for granted. You start attracting people who want someone they can respect and admire. And here's the most important thing. You stop needing to be irresistible to feel valuable, because the process of becoming irresistible teaches you something crucial about your own worth. It shows you that you don't need anyone else's validation to be complete. You become someone who's interesting to be around, not because you're trying to impress anyone, but because you're genuinely engaged with your own life. And that energy, that self-contained fascination with your own existence, that's what true irresistibility looks like. It's not about making people want you. It's about becoming someone who doesn't need them to want you to feel whole. And paradoxically, that's when people want you most. But there's something even more powerful that happens when you fully embrace these 4 steps. You discover that the people who lose interest when you become more mysterious, unpredictable, evolving, and scarce weren't the right people for you anyway. The ones who stay, who become more interested, who appreciate the complexity you're revealing, those are your people. Those are the relationships worth investing in. Because here's the final truth. You can't lose the right person by being your authentic, evolving, mysterious self. You can only lose the wrong people. And losing the wrong people isn't a loss. It's liberation. It's making space for the right connections to find you.